Donald Trump's political retribution campaign, as carried out by his allies in the Department of Justice, is, in some respects, proving to be a big flop. The latest failure, delivered by Judge James Boasberg, who quashed the subpoenas targeting Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell. New York Times reports today it showed that, quote, prosecutors are floundering in the most basic steps of criminal investigations into those President Trump wants scrutinized. Jeanine Pirro, who is overseeing the case, attempted to keep it alive today when she asked Judge Boasberg to reconsider quashing the subpoenas, which seems unlikely to end in her favor given just how scathing Judge Boasberg's decision was. I want to bring in New York Times Justice Department reporter Glenn Thrush. Also joining us, former Department of Justice pardon attorney Liz Oyer is here. She was fired by Trump's Justice Department last March after refusing to reinstate actor Mel Gibson's gun rights. Glenn Thrush, take me through the reporting and just explain how basic this step is and how most judges in good faith don't have friction, especially with federal prosecutors, over this effort, this step.
Well, this is what happens when cases are, ordered up like Uber rides or Uber Eats orders by the White House, and the people downstream from this are essentially compelled to do it, or else they can hit the tiles or incur the wrath of the President of the United States, right? So basically, he just wanted Jerome Powell to be targeted legally, prosecutorially, as a form of both retribution for Powell not complying with his demands on interest rates, but also as a way to exert pressure on the Federal Reserve and to break down the traditional independence that has really made it a cornerstone of economic stability in the country. And there just wasn't much there. So what did they look at? Bill Pulte, Trump's housing guru, a man, by the way, I should say, isn't doing very much to address the core issue of affordability, which is likely to be a major issue in the midterms. But anyway, Bill Pulte came up with the idea of scrutinizing, one of the people who came up with the idea of the sort of scrutinizing the renovations at the Federal Reserve. And Jeanine Pirro was handed this and assigned it to some prosecutors who proceeded to try to get in touch with Powell. That didn't happen. And that kind of compelled Pirro to issue subpoenas. And that's what Judge Boasberg quashed. The basic way that Pirro has been dealing with this, and to some extent, she has been probably among the most successful Trump subordinates in dead-ending some of his edicts, and she has adopted what appears from the outside to be a somewhat cynical, if effective, approach, which is to simply present this material to judges and grand juries and let them kill it. Because let me tell you something, there isn't much of a percentage in telling Donald Trump no. So I think Pirro has essentially been doing some version of death by grand jury or death by judge. Present these things to them, in this case, the subpoenas that Boasberg said didn't have any grounding in evidence or legality, and let them do the dirty work for her. So that is, I think, what we are seeing here, which is a pressure valve that Pirro has found to figure out a way to sideline some of these investigations without having to say no to Donald Trump.
Well, Liz, the problem with that, if that is what her calculation is that they result in threats for the judges. Trump on Truth Social called for, quote, serious disciplinary action on federal Judge James Boasberg and other corrupt judges. Said SCOTUS has become little more than a weaponized and unjust political organization. After Trump uses his platform to attack individual judges by name, they often get pizzas sent to them in the name of the son of Justice Esther Salas, whose son was murdered. So it doesn't really put anything positive or safe in motion for the judges who get maligned by Trump. But I guess asking them to stand up to Trump is something that isn't going to happen. The other thing that happens, and this is in the story, is that DOJ has no credibility. Let me read this part of the story. As remarkable as Judge Boasberg's ruling was, it reflected a broader trend of judges across the country who increasingly doubt the word of lawyers from the Justice Department. Those lawyers have traditionally enjoyed a solid bond of trust with courts, known in legal parlance as the presumption of regularity, but that presumption has eroded over the past year. Just talk about how they have gone about the business out in full view of destroying the credibility of the Department of Justice.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here, Nicole. This appears to be, by my count, at least the sixth of Donald Trump's purported revenge prosecutions that has failed, and at least three of them have been under the auspices of Jeanine Pirro's office. This comes on the heels of her failed attempt to get charges against 6 Democratic members of Congress who made this video warning folks that they should not adhere to unlawful orders, people in the military. She also reportedly failed to be able to get charges related to President Biden's use of the auto pen, which was another subject that Trump wanted for a criminal investigation. So he's really failing to be able to get these charges. And the judges are holding strong and doing their jobs. And what's remarkable that we're seeing is that these cases are failing very early in the process. It's really extraordinary. We do sometimes see situations where charges are brought and they're ultimately rejected by a jury. There's an acquittal after evidence is presented. But what we have seen recently is that cases are failing either in the grand jury, they're not even able to get an indictment, or judges are dismissing indictments very shortly after they're returned, which is what happened in the initial indictment of James Comey and Letitia James, or here, even in the grand jury subpoena investigation process, which is an extremely early phase of the proceeding. These cases are just not even getting off the ground. I think we can see from the fact that Jeanine Pirro felt that she needed to have a press conference and blame Judge Boasberg for this, that she is under a tremendous amount of pressure to be able to make these cases. And she felt that she needed to justify that. The president, of course, went on this tirade against Judge Boasberg and said he should be held accountable for misconduct. But they've already actually tried to do that with Boasberg. Pam Bondi actually filed a judicial misconduct complaint against him, which was dismissed late last year.